everybody, and welcome to the Difference Makers, where we highlight great Americans that are stepping up in our communities. And oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, we have a treat for you today. I'm your host, Alex Nelson. Today we're being joined by candidates who this candidate brings a lifetime of leadership and service and accountability to the table. I'm excited. World, meet Mr. Bob Weiss, a candidate for the Winston-Salem Forsyth County School Board of Education. 26 years in the United States military. Bob, you're trying to beat mine there. That's crazy. But West Point education, decades of leadership, and I'm not even going to get into it too much because Bob, tell me about yourself, just a few minutes.
Thanks, Alex. Yes, I graduated from West Point back in 1971. So you all can do the math. I'm 76. The Army fortunately sent me on to graduate school. I spent a lot of time on active duty, as Alex did. I enjoyed just about every minute of it, other than some of the deployments, but otherwise it was great. And then after I retired from the Army, I was recruited into the corporate world and spent another 25 years in the corporate world. And I guess because of my background in leadership, I had roles that were chief executive officer, chief operating officer, or chief financial officer, one of the three, for those 25 years. I also then, during my civilian career, spent a lot of times on charity boards. I did also sit on three public fund boards, public companies. And today I sit on the Salvation Army Board of Directors here in Winston-Salem. I have the reason I'm doing this, I have two grandchildren who will be starting in the public fund, or I'm sorry, the public school system next year. And I want to make sure that they have a good program that they'll be going into.
Bob, what ultimately motivated you to transition from a career in the Army and private sector into running for school board? It's an
Yeah,
amazing task, but please let us know what motivated you.
right. I've never run for public office ever in my life. This is a first time for me. I just got so upset when I started reading about the issues that were going on in Forsyth County's school system that I kept reading and looking and talking to people and said, this is really something that makes no sense to me, that with just basic leadership and basic management, this should never, ever, ever have happened. So I looked into it, and finally my wife and I talked about it. After church one Sunday, came home and I said, I'm going to do it. And that was mid-December, so I think I only had 2 or 3 days left before I had to submit my application, which I did. And I think to net it out, I want to leave something for my grandchildren and for the friends of my daughter and son-in-law who have kids in the public school system. I'm at the final chapters of my life. You and I both, spent a lot of time serving the country, and I saw this as just a good way that I could help. I could give some benefit to the community, and that's why I did it.
Well, you mentioned the importance of accountability. I mean, you both know, that's something our politicians and, well, this school board and everybody really needs to have a real good lesson on accountability. What does accountability in a school system look like in practice?
Well, yeah, accountability means an awful lot of things, and it doesn't just mean putting reports out, having spreadsheets, putting it out to a website, something like that. Accountability means taking responsibility for the decisions you make. And if you're going to make decisions, you better be well informed. You better have done your homework. You better have done the research. So there's a lot of work that has to go on in the background when you make a decision. And you have to feel that that's the best decision for all of the constituents that you serve. So on the Board of Education, we serve obviously the students. obviously the teachers, but also the taxpayers, because a third of what we pay into our taxes, our property taxes, goes to the school board. So you have to really feel comfortable that you've done all your homework. You can't just rely that somebody has given you a report and that you accept that report. You have to ask the hard questions, make sure that they can answer those hard questions. I also believe that there's a way that here in the Forsyth County school system, we can do a better job at the superintendent level and at the administration level. Back when there was the first interim superintendent, I wrote a white paper about what needs to, that I saw from a corporate standpoint, what needed to happen. One of the things was I said we needed to have a professional audit committee, and whether she took my advice or not, they started a professional audit committee. They have people who were in the audit business from outside of the school system, outside of the board, who report to the board, and really a very strong group. I also made the same point that we needed to do that for the budget and finance committee. Now that hasn't happened, but I would see that we should put together that kind of a group. And there's the other part of the accountability is what we need to do in the county. And if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, what we would need to do is have a full-time, independent, outside auditor that reports to the board of directors. So this is a pretty standard item in the corporate world, where somebody is reviewing the transactions, make sure that they are done according to standards. And there's something called the government, or GASP, but it's the Government Association of Standards for Accounting. And then making sure that there is no malfeasance going on. Recently, I was at a forum, and one of the incumbent board members made a comment that this current board shouldn't be held accountable for any of the issues because they were the ones that found the issues, not the one that's caused the issues. Unfortunately for that person, the auditor just came out, and the state auditor just came out and said that there was a $15 million issue that occurred in September of this year of 2025. So that clearly happened under that board's watch. So,
Well,
yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that goes right into the next segment that we're going into. Budget shortfall. Now, I know what would happen to an executive officer, or command sergeant major during our last missions that we were given. If we had a budget shortfall, we wouldn't be in that position, would we?
No, we would
But
not.
the budget shortfall has been a major concern, not only me, but every citizen in Forsyth County. How would your leadership help address the financial oversight and prevent future issues? So, thank
you. Yes. So, first of all, the county and the administration should not rely on tax increases to solve the budget shortfall. That's not a solution. Again, we are all, you, me, any person that owns a home here in Forsyth County would be hit with that, and that's not a solution when somebody else has caused a problem. So how do you fix the issues? First of all, you have to understand where the revenues are coming from. And I think that's one of the major problems that we've had in the past. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But understand where our revenues are coming from. Obviously, it's taxes, federal government, state government. And then there's a big bundle that comes from grants, where the some charitable organizations, some other organizations, corporations will grant money to an organization like the school board and say, you have this money for the next 3 years. And you, during that 3 year period of time, you can use it for certain things. But at the end of 3 years, you might not have that. And that's one of the things that have caused us problems in Winston-Salem and in Forsyth County is the admit for the out years too. So after that grant has expired, that they'll get some more money. Well, in fact, that doesn't happen. So how do you do it? You have to go in and look very carefully at all the expenses, and you have to look at who your out the end user of our product is, and that's the student. How do we make sure that we give the student the best product that we can possibly give them? That's the best education. There are a lot of ways around that, but we have to do it within the budget and within the revenues that we have. That might mean to make hard decisions that, of course, you know that going in, you've made those decisions, and you can't just assume that money is going to come out of the sky for you to be able to keep staffing levels at a certain level, whatever it happens to be. You have to make sure that the budget and the expenses match.
Well, that's pretty good. Thanks, Bob. Can you explain your vision of what community schools means, and why do you believe that model is important for Forsyth County?
Yes, it's interesting that you bring that up. I did some research just this morning. Back between, I think it was in September of 2023 to September of 2025, the school board was given a grant of just about $1 million. It was $983,000 to
Mhm.
look at social engineering, to move people's districting around so that the community schools were really no longer in play. That my home, for example, where I live, was going to be redistricted to another school because of social engineering. They wanted more people that looked like me to be assigned to that school. Um, Unfortunately, when I bought my house, I looked at the school system and I looked at the schools where my house was located. And I bought this house for that. One of those reasons was what schools was I going to be in so that my resale value would be okay. Well, when you start doing all this social engineering and you move people around, it affects their retirement. It affects their, where their kids could go to school. And that's not good for anybody. And it's not good for the students. I actually went out and was talking to a group of students, and I asked them, and this was and junior high school kids. And I said, so are you glad you're here at this school? And a number of them said no. And I said, why not? And they said, well, my friends are all over at the other school. And the kids that I grew up with go to this different school, and I want to be with them. I don't want to be here. Now, I know why that money was given back in 2023 and 2025. I think we all understand that. But that's not good for the kids. So these kids were not happy. They were still doing well. They were coming to school for the most part. It also leads to an issue that in Forsyth County, we have a terrible truancy rate. We have a truancy rate that's somewhere between 10 and 20% of the kids' population. So
Wow.
you multiply that out, and that's somewhere between 4,000 and 9,000 kids that are truant for one reason or another. A lot of them are truant because this redistricting has caused them either to now have to get on a bus to get to school. So, in effect, it's a form of busing, or it's taken them away from their friends, so they don't want to be there, or they have to go to a school where they just don't feel comfortable. and they don't feel that they are as smart as the other kids, have the same opportunities, or whatever it happens to be. So they decide they're not going to go to school. Now, is that good for the student? Absolutely not. Is it good for Forsyth County? Absolutely not. And there's a lot of ways around to fix that problem, but community schools is not one of them. To, move people around for redistricting isn't it. And just because they got $1 million was not a good thing. Now, they did put this last rezoning on hold, and if it happens to come up when I'm on the board, I will fight any change to the zoning as it is today.
Well, I know you're a fighter. I just want to look at your background. You're a fighter. Your background in leadership and management really impresses me. So, how are you going to approach making tough decisions in Forsyth County with staff and with students? And how's your background help you out with that?
Sure. Well, to make really tough decisions and to make them stick, you have to be able to um, communicate to the other board members and to the staff that this is the right thing to do. So you really have to have a good plan. That goes back to what I said of have to do your research, have to understand what people are proposing. And when you make a proposal, and you need to have already talked to the board members, you can't come to a board meeting and expect to convince eight other board members to follow your lead. You have to have spoken to them throughout the process up to before that meeting. And especially when you're in one of those meetings, and I mean, I've been in the audience just watching them, and there's the teachers union is up front, and the ministers are in another area, and you have individual teachers standing around. That's not the place where you're going to be able to have a conversation about how to make changes. Now, I'll give you a very real example of what's going on right now.
Okay.
So, last year, or the last couple of years, the school board cut the exceptional children, the special education kids, cut their funding tremendously. They were the only area in the school system that was under budget, but they still got clobbered and lost teachers, lost assistants. And it's been a real problem for those parents that have kids in the EC world. So if you hear EC, that's exceptional children, and it can be a lot of things. So special ed, it could be kids that have physical issues that need special requirements. Well, right now there are two schools here in town under something called the Center for Exceptional Children. It's a private program. Those two schools have excess capacity, and the school has been leasing property from them. So the school brings their exceptional kids into that facility. Well, it benefits everybody across the board because now you have a large group of teachers that know how to deal with kids with those special needs. You have facilities that are outfitted for that. You have the cafeterias outfitted for that. And something that most people don't think about is they have two nurses at each one of these locations. When you have exceptional kids, there's a need for nurses pretty regularly throughout the day for whatever reason. Well, the staff is now looking at canceling this contract because there are two separate buildings now available where they could move the kids that are in the school system and the exceptional child area over to one of those schools. It makes sense if all the numbers work, but you have to look at all the numbers. It's not simply the cost of the contract, it's the ancillary cost, the cost of the nurses, the cost of widening corridors, and all of those other things. Now, I spoke to one of the incumbent board members about this, and I was told, oh, they've got it under control. They've really done their homework. And I said, so have they looked at nurses? And this person said, I don't know. I have to go back and look at that. Well, if that person had to go back and look at it, means that the homework wasn't done. But it also means that potentially all of the background work hasn't been done. It also brings up is if they make this move, how many parents are going to pull their kids out of the school system? So we pull more kids out of the school system. How many of them will send them back to this private school? So all of that work has to be done ahead of time. It has to be discussed at the board and individual board members so that when you go into the board meeting, you either know it's going to pass or it's not going to pass. You know, we used to call, we had to be able to count our votes. If we couldn't count our votes, it wasn't even worth bringing it up. So that's an example of doing your homework ahead of time, making sure that you've talked to the staff to make sure that they've done their work, and talk to the other board members to make sure they've done their work. So I just bring that one up as something that it's near and dear to my heart right now, because I had a daughter who was special needs, and then we have my daughter's best friend, another my other daughter's best friend, has a child at the school, and my wife and I end up donating money there because it's just near to us.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up too. My brother has cerebral palsy. He's been crippled since birth, and they're amazing children. If I could take the heart of my brother and put it in some of these other people, but we'd save the world. But
Yes.
you spend a lot of time volunteering and mentoring and military services. We've got villages all over the world that me and you and others, I mean, we're in it for the children and saving people. But
Yes.
now, how has that shaped your perspective on education and what the students actually need?
Yeah, I just got goosebumps you bringing that up. I mean, it really is near to me. Let me go back when I was a teenager. Well, first of all, my dad was a physician and he volunteered for World War II. After World War II, he got out, and then he volunteered for Korea because he was an anesthesiologist and the army needed him.
Mhm.
So we and my mom was a nurse, and my mom worked as a night supervisor of a maternity ward for 39 years. So this gives you a kind of the idea that my dad and mom kind of, well, no, not kind of, they really instilled in us the idea that we had to give back. We were fortunate enough that we could. Um, when I was in high school, my mom worked at nights on weekends. So on Friday night, I was a swimmer and I was a rower in high school. And on Friday nights, my mom went to work at 10:30. I had to drive home and pick her up and take her to work, and I always did. And all my friends followed me. So there were about 12 of us, and we were big kids. And we went up to the maternity ward, and she put us in rockers, and she would bring out the babies, and we would rock the babies. Now, this was before lawyers got involved, and now you couldn't do it. Yeah, I mean, you can do it at thing. You and I can do it because they have something like called grandfather rockers or something like that. So as a teenager, I was rocking babies. So the kids just, it was just second nature. But then in the army, you're right. We were always encouraged to volunteer for something else. So, when I was not deployed, I taught swimming and I coached a swimming team. I did that throughout my entire career. A lot of times I'd be on the deck of the pool in my BDUs or ACUs and my boots and getting wet, but that's what I did. And then I continued to do it. So the kids, have always been something special to us. I mentioned my daughter, who was special needs. Uh, her birth father, we adopted her. Her birth father was bipolar and ADHD, and he was dyslexic. I mean, he had it all. Our daughter was bipolar and she was dyslexic. And so we had different issues throughout her teenage years. She's now 26. She's a great mother. Fortunately, we were able to do things for her. She's just doing great. And I don't know, the kids have always meant something to us. Even when I was in Iraq the first time, um, we were given soccer jerseys to the kids, because they were out in the dirt playing, and we'd write back to the high schools that we went to, and we'd get soccer jerseys. And I mean, you did it, I did it. That was just something we did, because if we can help the kids, we can help the country.
Most people don't understand what military brings to children all over the world, and I'm glad you did that, and I'm glad there's others out there. And I could talk to you all day, and sir, military, and that's what we do. But for voters, I mean, there's still a lot of voters out there that's still trying to decide. Republican, Democrats, you among your constituents, you know, what do you want them to know about you? That what's your priorities and what sets you apart as a candidate from everyone else?
Sure. Well, first of all, what sets me apart, I think, is the fact that I have an extensive leadership background, but also the corporate finance world. So I understand how to read documents. I can, cut through all the numbers very quickly and very easily. So that's what does set me apart. I tell people, look, I don't think I'd make a very good teacher because I've not been trained to be a teacher. I've been trained to be a finance CEO and leader, and I think I can do that very well. Um, Similarly, I don't think I'd be a good minister because for the same reason. That's just not what I've been trained to do. And it's not something that you can learn on the job. Similarly, I don't think you can learn being a board member on the job. And if you have been in the job, I think there are four candidates who have been on the board for at least 4 years. There's one person who was on it from 2018 to 2022, and then there are three that are on it today. You have to look at what happened under their watch, and under their watch, things aren't so hot. So what I bring to it is the ability to fix those issues. Plus, they wouldn't have occurred, if I was in a leadership role on the board.
Well, Bob, thank you for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. It's been a treat for me and all of the listeners, the thousands of listeners that we have out there. Your willingness to serve this community, it's appreciated. It's clear that your experiences in leadership, finance, and your service has shaped your approach to tackling these challenges that are facing our school district here in Forsyth County. We appreciate you sharing your vision with us. Now, to our listeners out there, if you want to learn more about Bob Weiss and his campaign for the Winston-Salem Sheriff, Winston-Salem County School Board of Education, be sure to follow his campaign and stay engaged. And stay engaged in everybody. This is a decision-making year. And of course, we are the difference makers. Thank you very much. Old man out.